This is the world according to Jen and Carolyn.
Hey, Jen. So what are we talking about today? Well, I just came from a drag brunch.
Yeah, well, that's an indicator of what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about the colorful and amazing history of drag. Yay. Because drag has been in the news a ton lately. Mm-hmm. And as far as we're concerned, for all the wrong reasons, you know, the right wing, that is, you know, they continue to vilify drag artists, claiming that these beautiful performers are out to do serious harm to our children. I have a child, and I do not think that's accurate.
Which is funny, as opposed to the performers like Bill Cosby or Kevin Spacey, who aren't up to no good either.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not even either, just up to no good.
Right.
Come on.
It's true. All the attention is being focused on the wrong group of people as far as we're concerned. Statistics demonstrate that drag performers really are absolutely no threat to your children or to anyone. They are just out to have fun and entertain with the beautiful, you know, performances that constitute their art.
Yes, the makeup, the costumes, the comedy.
Yes, yeah. And so, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about how, you know, we came from the ancient Greek theater, where drag was prevalent, to all the way to where we are now, where there's an Emmy-winning show about being a drag queen. So hide your kids. Just kidding. You don't have to hide your kids, and we're going to tell you why. In fact, I don't think anybody who listens to our show would ever think that that's necessary.
Have you ever taken your little boy to the drag reading?
No, not yet. At the library, I want to, but it seems like every time I come across it, it doesn't work with our schedule. Because when you're a parent with a child, you know, you're constantly busy doing shit. That you'd rather not do, but you have to for the sake of your kids. So eventually we will get there. So, you know, we want to also go on record. Surprise, we're cis straight women.
Very.
And so, you know, we love the drag community, but we understand that, you know, we could misspeak or say something in a way that doesn't, you know, correspond with the way it's supposed to be said. So if we say inadvertently anything that comes off as offensive, or we say anything incorrect, you are welcome to reach out to us. We are open to learning. So yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. We don't mind. We don't mind at all. So, you know, what is drag?
Tell me.
Again, I don't really think our listeners need an education on this. But it's, you know, it's so much more than what you see on RuPaul's Drag Race, for instance. It's an art form, a political statement, a source of entertainment, a communal activity. It's an empowering space for queer people, many of whom are people of color, to come together in a safe and beautiful space to connect and make art.
And across cultures.
Yes.
I can't think of any culture that did not have or does not have some component of drag performance.
That's right. And history demonstrates that. And in doing the research, it's evident that this is something that spans time and spans cultures.
Nazis didn't burn everything.
They really didn't.
See it in art.
Absolutely. They tried. They did not succeed.
Good.
So, you know, we'll use PBS's definition, which is a simple one. Drag is the art of dressing and acting exaggerately as another, they say, gender or sex, usually for entertainment as comedy, singing, dancing, lip syncing, or all of the above. The really excellent drag artists are going to make you laugh.
Yeah.
They are incredibly entertaining. They're hilarious. And if you can go to a drag show and not walk away with a smile on your face, then there might be something wrong with you.
Yeah, agreed.
Carolyn, do you remember when you first learned about drag?
You know, it's so funny because when I first wrote this, I thought, God, I only think I have one or two names. And then as I started thinking about it, I could have gone on and on. I had to actually stop myself.
Yeah.
So can you even call yourself a true SF kid from the 80s if you didn't see the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, aka gender fucking nuns, somewhere in the cast room?
They do such good work for the community.
Very, especially in the AIDS crisis. And if you're a lonely gay person just trying to meet someone at a bar, they will hook you up and just be sweet. So, like most girls in the good girl, bad girl dichotomy, that definitely runs through my veins and my vagina. So outspoken female energy always made me feel really powerful, and also not what I was raised to be. I always liked Ursula better than the Little Mermaid, and I didn't know this, but did you know that Divine was the inspiration for Ursula?
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
Very cool.
So, I love Mae West. I love Dolly Levi, none of which were drag queens, but obviously you get where my head was going.
Right.
So you could say that women who parodied being what a woman was like hit me at a young age, even when I didn't really know why.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, I don't know if I would not count these as drag queens, but Some Like It Hot, Flip Wilson's Geraldine, Martin Lawrence's Shanae.
That is all drag.
Okay, see, I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's good to know. I also grew up in SF ballet in the dance world where being unique and different was kind of a plus. So I saw Paris as Burning.
Oh, awesome.
Early on.
Awesome.
Far before they showed it to us in sociology class. I loved Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Aww.
I loved Divine. I don't know how I found that. It was like on Coffee TV 20 one day on a movie. I just loved all things John Mars. Dame Edna actually was very popular in my family because my parents loved British comedy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I loved anything also that had to do with New York. I think you and I bonded a lot about this.
Totally.
And so Club Kids and the resurgence of the 70s disco, scene.
Yep.
So anything that was fun and glamour and not giving a fuck and sparkle and excess. Very a dual side of me that I don't feel like I ever got to be.
Yep.
And so that really spoke to me.
Yeah, we're really fortunate to have grown up in or around San Francisco. So I feel like our exposure to queer art and queer people was that was frequent for us.
Yes.
Especially for me, because I grew up in a queer household, right? I have two moms. My mom is a born and raised San Francisco lesbian, but it wasn't until fifth grade, actually, because my house was primarily just lesbians, and the odd gay guy every once in a while rolling through, and which I always liked because I was like, I need a daddy male energy, not like the daddy that my mom was, but male energy. That was really lacking in my house. Lots of vagina. Anyway, needless to say, it was actually my fifth grade best friend's mom's best friend who taught me about drag. Now Michelle, in retrospect, Michelle was definitely trans, but Michelle referred to themselves as a drag queen. I don't want to be like the right who conflates drag and trans. Not doing that here, but Michelle referred to themselves as a drag queen. And so Michelle was amazing, and we would help them get ready for their performance, and they would go to, this is really sad, and this is when I learned about how fucking hateful people could be. And obviously I knew how hateful people could be just instinctively, which is why I never disclosed my mom's sexuality to any of my friends or their parents. But it really was evident when Michelle went and performed at this fucking hick restaurant called the Farmhouse in Redwood City. And I don't know why they chose to do this, because it just feels like such an unsafe space for a person like Michelle. But they would go and perform I'm Every Woman there.
Yeah.
And which was, they did an excellent job of performing this. But these hicks totally beat Michelle up in the parking lot.
Shit.
And they had a black eye, and it was just awful. So
is Michelle, you say is Michelle still around?
I don't know. But Michelle was also working as a sex worker.
Okay.
And so it was so crazy because Michelle's dates would show up and they'd always be dudes who were on the DL. They looked like mild-mannered, straight dudes with wedding rings, and they'd be greeted by these two fifth grade girls and be like, come in, can I get you something to drink? And my friend's house was filthy. There were animals everywhere. We'd help Michelle get ready for their date and spray their hair and stuff. So I'm sure this was a really uncomfortable situation for any dude trying to live on the DL who was trans-amorous. But so that was my life.
Jen.
But I do hope Michelle is still out there and doing well. But that was how I learned about drag performance.
Wow.
So I think everyone knows what drag is, but I don't think a lot of us know the origin of the art. I certainly didn't. So this is brought to you by National Geographic. Woo. So some historians believe that drag's early history can be traced to theater in ancient Greece and Rome, where men would play female characters. Female impersonation animation was also part of kabuki theater in Japan and peaking opera performances in China in the 17th and 18th centuries, respectively. This goes way back. And then Shakespeare, of course.
Yes.
Even using drag as like a major plot device in The Twelfth Night when Viola disguises herself as Cicero. My Shakespeare isn't that good, you guys. I only read what was required of me in high school. Shakespeare never really pumped my nads, but got a lot of friends who love Shakespeare. So, other historians, they argue that drag's true origins are a little more recent. So Lady J, who's a drag performer with a doctorate in musicology, focused on drag history and traces its debut back to 1860s Victorian England, when Ernest Bolton of the duo Bolton and Park described his cross-dressing as an act of drag, the first known use of the term. So I love this. Some accounts suggest it was inspired by the petticoats the men wore that would drag on the floor as they performed. Oh, I get such like an opulent, cool Victorian image in my head. Fucking wigs and petticoats. How do I not like period pieces?
I don't know. You always say fuck them, but I love them.
My house
make you watch The Crown.
I know. My living room only looks like a Victorian parlor. I don't care. So around the same time in the U.S., female impersonators started in racist minstrel shows, during which mostly white actors wore blackface to portray racial stereotypes of African Americans. Then there were, I know, we don't like that, but it just goes to show that there was a component of drag even back in the terrible minstrel days.
Yeah.
Drag balls. Some scholars believe that the annual galas held in New York City's Harlem neighborhood paved the way in the late 1860s. Others argue that William Dorsey Swan's dance parties in Washington, D.C. are the first concrete evidence we have of drag balls.
That
They made the drag ball. I know. I want to go so bad.
I love how it's in Washington, D.C.
I know.
Stop pretending y'all don't, come on.
Well, pretending like this stuff is brand new. Like trans is brand new and drag is brand new.
And subversive. It's like, no, it's
been around.
Read a fucking history book.
Forever. Well, they want to, they want to.
Oh, right.
When I say they, I refer to the right. They want to just completely eliminate all history that isn't just the victory of white men over people of color.
Got it.
Born enslaved in 1858, speaking of, in Maryland, Swan began to host drag balls as early as 1882. He was also the first in history to describe himself as Queen of Drag.
You gotta love that.
I know. I'm like, dude, I want to hang out with anybody who's like, I'm the Queen of Drag. Like, I want to be friends with you. So then there, Swan and his drag balls were also pioneers in another sense. Drag those balls.
Sorry.
As defenders of the queer community's right to assemble. Not only had Swan attempted to fight the 1888 arrest that he was subjected to, but in 1896 he wrote to President Grover Cleveland demanding a pardon, and Grover Cleveland said, nah, fuck you, Grover Cleveland.
Yeah.
Drag balls also began to flourish in New York at the height of the Harlem Renaissance in the early 20th century, as recorded in Langston Hughes' 1940 biography. And then it evolved into what Carolyn mentioned, the 1990 documentary, Paris is Burning. Most people don't know that's where Madonna got Vogue. She
borrowed it, right?
I think she compensated at least one of the folks who was a part of the Paris is Burning people who were portrayed.
That the MC?
I believe so.
Okay.
So I think she did hook this person up and gave credence, applause.
I came across a kind of interesting article about the MC, and I'll have to go back to that because I wonder if that mentions stuff.
I'm very fortunate to work in a place where for our equity book club, we watched Paris is Burning just a few months ago, and we were like coloring pictures of RuPaul. I was like, man, I work in a dope place. I'm like, this is so great. But yeah, I mean, coming from a place where, harkening back to the way I was raised, where my mom's sexuality was a big old secret.
Yeah. And
now working in government where we embrace these sorts of things, and we fight for LGBTQ and queer rights, and we have an office of trans initiatives. Like, this is the fulfillment of a dream for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, it makes it so much more blatant when you're in a place where it's so welcome, it's so safe.
Yeah.
How much more frightening that is.
Yeah.
Knowing that that's a unique experience.
There are so many places here in the U.S. that are currently trying to legislate against drag, which we're going to get into. That is not something we will ever hopefully have to worry about here, because we in San Francisco have our own drag laureate, Darcy Drollinger. I hope I said that right. We have drag story hour at the library that you mentioned, tons of family-friendly events, and
it's not going anywhere.
No, it is not. So, Carolyn, can you talk to us a bit about the psychology here? I think a lot of folks who might be unfamiliar with drag or don't know much about drag, they think that drag's really rooted in questioning one's gender identity, but I don't think that's really the case, right?
Well, and again, I view anyone's, and I think you all agree, and hopefully our listeners will too, that anyone's expression of whatever they want to be is personal and private. So while I don't know that you can create a blanket definition of drag queens are this or are not this, it's different for every individual. And I think just having that mindset to start is a good place. But Jennifer O'Brien wrote a 2018 Psychology Today article about the psychology of drag. And I thought the framework that they provided was kind of helpful.
Okay.
So this is a direct quote. It's important to note here that performing in drag is not necessarily rooted in questioning one's gender identity. This is a common misconception. So that's literally what you just said. Drag queens, otherwise known as female impersonators, are most typically gay cisgender men, though there are many drag queens of varying sexual orientations and gender identities who perform and entertain on stage in nightclubs and bars.
And drag kings.
And so it's like, I'll make a very, very silly analogy. It's like saying all clowns are secretly depressed because they're wearing makeup that's smiley. Like, you don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. You can't draw conclusions about why somebody's doing something.
I don't care.
Yeah. No. And you shouldn't.
Well, right, you shouldn't. I think, we'll get to that part too. So a social worker, Kiana Shelton, wrote a 2022 article titled The Joy of Drag in Psychiatric Times. Sorry, I am blessed. I'm stumbling over my words. It's been a very chatty week over here.
Yeah, I bet.
The Joy of Drag comments that drag has many interpretations, but it's loosely defined, like you said, as a performing in an exaggerated way that caricatures, and this is what I love especially about drag, it challenges male and female stereotypes. It's at its core, drag is a creative act, a powerful and personal form of self-expression. Now, Jen, nowhere in here am I reading anything about who you want to fuck, how you want to fuck them, what you want to put your dick in, what you want to not put in it. It doesn't have anything to do with it.
Well, the right is so obsessed with what queer people do in the bedroom. I'm like, what's going on with you, baby?
Always.
Yeah, what do you want to do?
Speaking of Shakespeare, doth protest too much.
Right? Get out there and do some exploration.
Yeah.
Stop hating.
Especially now, anyone can do drag. So you mentioned drag kings, which are women who personify men.
I want to do it. I'd be so fucking good at it. Well, I was raised by a butch lesbian. I would roll.
I'd go see that performance. They've been around just as long as drag queens, men who perform as women. So drag is different, though, than something a term of cross-dressing, which is, is a personal, private act. Cross-dressing is defined as the act of wearing clothes traditionally or stereotypically associated with a different gender. This is where I get the problem with that, though, because, women wear pants. This is specifically when a man chooses to be feminine.
Right.
And I think that challenges a very weird thing for very cisgender white men. Why would you give up your masculinity and choose femininity?
Yeah.
There's that like, ugh.
Well, I think it's associated with weakness.
Yeah.
Which is, what is that saying about women?
Yes, exactly. So, performers like David Bowie, rest in peace, Billy Porter, this is from the article from Kiana Shelton, have been seen as many pioneers in this gender fluid style of movement. And this has paved the way for singers of today, like Harry Styles, who kind of have this androgynous, it doesn't really matter what you wear. Again, I think of like how in the Hunger Games, like it just becomes this like, you're just coming up with the most extravagant, extreme costume.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And so while drag is sweeping into the mainstream, there is this, again, there's this very particular in drag queens, this idea that I'm a man and I'm going to put on a caricature of a very strong, very specific kind of woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she's literally got balls half the time.
Yeah.
Or maybe she doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's their choice.
Yeah.
And who the fuck cares?
That's exactly it. And you know what? I'm really happy to see that there are so many positive psychological based articles about drag, because I feel like psychiatry and psychology has come a long way from saying, this is some kind of neuroses. Like there's something wrong here. Like even the classification of homosexuality in the DSM as being, an issue. So
it's not correlated.
No. It's not. And I'm really glad that, at least psychology and social psychology is acknowledging this and saying
modern.
Yes.
I would think we got to understand there are still places.
Yes.
And still places in the United States and people in power who don't feel this way.
This is true.
And I'm sure in a vacuum.
Yes, we very much are. And I'm sure there are people who have degrees in psychology or even psychiatry who do like conversion therapy, 100%. For instance. That is so fucking sick.
Yeah.
But that's not we're not doing that today. Don't get me started. Don't get me riled up. Okay, so we are going to talk a bit about the haters because we want to spend some time debunking the bullshit that those on the right have been spewing in relation to our drag kings and queens. So Republicans have been on an anti-drag crusade for quite some time, but 2023 was a particularly bad year. These assholes, this is from a PBS article, claim to be worried about drag shows being sexual in nature. Objections often hinge on nudity, which is like big fucking deal.
So are most of the music shows you go see.
Exactly. PBS, says every performer makes a different choice, but drag queens often wear more, not less clothing than you'd see on a typical American woman of the 21st century at a public beach or on network TV. Then they talk about kids. Our kids,
the children.
Our kids are going to be groomed by these drag queens.
That's such a common phrase.
It is. Well, I remember, and I was so offended. One of my first bosses, we were having a debate, and their kid was like playing soccer or something, and they said, they wouldn't want their kid to have a gay coach.
Oh, God.
And I said, why? And they said, well, they're more likely to molest my child. And as the daughter of a lesbian, I was really fucked up by that. And granted, those negative, characterizations often fall on men more so than gay men, more so than gay women, but still.
Yeah.
And that reinforced to me, this is why I didn't tell anyone my mom was gay.
And it's statistically untrue.
It so is. And if there's a man molesting children, he's not a homosexual. He's a pedophile.
Yes.
There is a difference. His proclivity is for small children.
And that's a paraphilia that is in the DSM, and I'm absolutely okay with that.
We're good with that one. We're good with that one. So yeah, they talk about the kids. Drag kings and queens always alter their acts for kids. Always. Queens aren't showing up at the library for story hour and telling raunchy jokes. They often dress like Elsa or some other character that kids dig.
There were several little children at the drag brunch I went to.
Yeah.
And it was so sweet. They were giving hugs. It was as if I'm looking at a Disney princess.
Yes, totally. Liam would be way into it too. Yeah. So the right claims that queens are grooming kids, claim that they groom children, implying attempts to sexually abuse them. If you're not familiar with the term grooming, attempts to sexually abuse them or somehow influence their sexual orientation or gender identity. Hello, raised by a lesbian, grew up straight as an arrow. So
they might teach your kid like how to do some cool brow arching or some foundation. I got actually some great makeup tips, but no one tried to molest me.
Right? No, definitely not. So this is for folks who don't know what the term grooming is. I'll tell you about it. In a sexual sense, describes how child molesters entrapped and abuse their victims. It's used by opponents of drag as well as by protesters in other realms of the LGBTQ opposition, and it seeks to falsely equate it with pedophilia and other forms of child abuse. It's exactly what I just said, right? And so perpetrators of this bullshit rhetoric can then cast themselves as saviors of children and try to frame anyone who disagrees, a political opponent, for example, as taking the side of child abusers.
But not the Catholic Church.
Exactly.
and priests.
Right.
So that's the thing. If you're going to call it something one thing,
Right.
then I'd like to see you do it everywhere. At least be fair in your bigotry.
Yeah. Well, especially where we have the data to demonstrate that not everybody, of course, my kid, Catholic school's fine.
Yes,
Catholicism, but
statistically
happen.
and historically.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we know.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah. So I'm a little.
We're gonna get very riled up. I'm gonna need a drink or some yoga.
Yeah. Depending on the church, I might be a little more afraid of my child becoming an altar boy than I would of my kid going to a drag show. Let me just put it that way. Yeah. So the grooming claim is an oldie but a goodie, and frankly, it's why, like I said, I didn't tell folks that my mom was gay until I was 18 years old. It was only at that point that I felt comfortable enough. Yeah. To tell people that my mom was gay. And it was, when it was really when I met Rocio. Oh. So I met a good friend. She'd moved from New York, and I was 18 and I was in my senior year at high school. She was a little bit younger, and she just offhandedly mentioned that her mom was gay. And I was like, wait, your mom's a lesbian too? And I just remember there was a bed between the two of us because we were cleaning up in our house, and we literally jumped across the bed and hugged each other. It was the first time I had ever met, to my knowledge, the kid of another queer person. Except for the people through like my mom's circle, right? Who also had children, but she seldom dated women with children.
And a very proud child.
Yes.
Of a very proud mother.
Yeah. And Rocio, she's bi and she never hid who she was or who her mom was. And I was like, oh God. And that emboldened me.
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, I can finally claim this part of my identity, because I might not be queer, but I was raised in a queer household. So it is a part of my identity in that sense, part of my identity that I felt like I had to hide for my personal safety. And no kid should have to feel that way. No. It's awful. So, this protecting kids line is absolutely bullshit. This is from a Guardian article. If you've seen Mrs. Doubtfire, you've seen drag to no negative impact on anyone. That's what I was talking about.
Doubtfire.
Right. Like Martin dressing, Medea, what's his face dressing? Tyler Perry. Like, that's all drag. Yeah. That is all drag, honey. So Sarah Kate Ellis, who's CEO and president of GLAAD, the LGBTQ plus advocacy organization, said the emerging war on drag performers could be seen as part of the ongoing right-wing hostility to transgender people, as some conservatives ignorantly and disingenuously link drag performers with trans individuals. They just lump everybody together.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to understand people, they just... everybody's painted with the same broad homophobic brush.
Yeah.
So this is from the Equality Magazine and Time. HRC, the Human Rights Committee, I always confuse it with the Human Rights Commission because we have one in San Francisco, has been actively fighting against the more than 40 discriminatory anti-drag bills nationwide that threaten to criminalize drag performances. Many of these bills dub all drag performers erroneously as adult cabaret performances. This legislation is masked in the conservative claim of protecting the nation's kids, but they are nothing more than a blanket, blatant, widespread assault on the entire LGBTQ plus community. So let's go through some of them. There's too many to name, again, 40, but here are some of the real egregious ones. Tennessee Governor Lee signed HB 9, House Bill 9, a bill banning many drag performances from occurring on any public property in the state, as well as in any location where people under age 18 could be present. So in doing so, Tennessee actually became the first state to criminalize drag performances.
How is that constitutional?
Well, don't worry, there's some hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's gold at the end of this rainbow, baby. Yeah. Arizona's drag ban. So Arizona, of course, would characterize drag shows as part of adult-oriented performances. Artists that perform in front of children under 15 would be subject to at least 10 years in prison, forced to register as sex offenders.
What?
Yeah. Yep. So people will allow minors to view drag shows or even enter a location where one is happening would also be punished. So if I allow my kid to go to a drag show, I could end up with jail time.
Good Lord.
It's my child. I get to determine what's best for them. And then Arkansas, of course, they introduced, Gary Stubblefield first introduced Senate Bill 43 with explicit language prohibiting drag shows from being performed on public property around minors. Then Idaho did something similar, calling it, sexual conduct. And sexual conduct is defined, this is great, this is how they defined it, defined as any movements with accessories that exaggerate sexual acts.
That's me right now, bitch.
Right? Like using a microphone, like I don't even know, like that. Make it broad so that they can catch everybody.
Oh my God.
We're not going to bore you with the other hateful details, but no.
Angry in parts of my body I didn't know existed right now.
I know. It's really sick shit. But
Give
don't
me some
lose hope.
Jen.
Let me give you some hope.
All right.
So this is also from the Guardian article. The Republican-led anti-drag crusade, seen by activists as front for a further attack on trans people, has run into problems. In each of the states I mentioned, judges, including one appointed by Trump, have blocked the laws after lawsuits from drag queens and civil rights groups. On Thursday night, this was last year, a judge in Texas extended a block on the state's drag ban from taking effect, setting up a hearing for permanent injunction later in September. So Florida has also seen a law restricting drag shows, and they blocked it. While in Alabama, a proposed bill was quietly dropped after hundreds of people protested at the state's capitol. So people are showing up. People are saying, we're not going to take this shit. This is bigotry. This is ridiculous.
Unconstitutional.
And and even judges that you would think would be in support of this legislation, like somebody who was appointed by Trump, for God's sake, is saying, actually, no, this is unconstitutional. This is ridiculous. This is a violation of one's civil rights.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Carolyn, can you talk to us a bit about homophobia or queer phobia and what is with these people? Personally, I think a lot of them are closeted, but what do I know?
Well, I hate these questions, Jen, because again, like we're saying, it's our privilege. My privilege is showing the fact that I'm appalled by this.
Yeah.
I have the right to do that. And yet it's very true that this is happening. When compared to those with more favorable attitudes towards the LGBT community, there's been studies that have shown there are absolutely negative attitudes. And this came out of a PBS article.
Yep.
And I'm going to give you 9 kind of facts, and you tell me if you think so. These answer your question.
Got it.
Who cares? Why is this such a big fucking deal? So they have less contact with gay and lesbians.
That makes sense.
That they think, that they know, right?
Yes.
Because like to what you said, most people go, well, I'm not going to say anything.
Right.
And the subjugated part of me is Jewish, kind of can understand that. My parents were like, don't tell people you're Jewish. People don't like Jews.
Yeah.
Don't say that. You're putting yourself out to get hurt. So I think they not having any contact or known contact, less likely to have reported in homosexual behaviors or identify themselves as gay as lesbian. They probably do, but there's who knows what's going on with them. Perceive their peers as manifesting negative attitudes, especially if they're male. So again, in the locker room that Donald Trump is so fan of, if you stand up for the bully, for someone being bullied, you might get bullied yourself, right? So surviving in that sense. So that I do agree with a lot. Are more likely to have resided in areas where negative attitudes are the norm. The Midwest, Southern United States, poor Canada, the Canadian prairies.
Is that where all the morons in Canada live?
I guess so. I personally feel a lot of cool people live in Canada.
No offense, prairie dwellers.
Prairie
Canadians, you're no friend of mine.
So rural areas, small towns, so that, especially during adolescence. So again, that tracks with you don't have a lot of contact and exposure.
Sure.
This one I think is very true. Likely to be older and less educated.
Yep.
More likely to be religious. So again, indoctrination into this is wrong and God's going to hate you. So in a religious ideology. Traditional restrictive attitudes about sex roles. I bet their wives still greet them with their slippers and baked pies. No offense if you do that. I love
They're probably into some kinky ass shit behind closed doors. Who was that pastor or why can't I remember his name? He got caught smoking meth in a hotel room having gay sex, and he was like one of the most virulent, vicious anti-gay folks ever.
I can't think of the name. Wasn't it? Didn't Larry Flint do a whole article about him?
Probably. Who knows? But that's what I'm talking about,
right? Well, and again, high levels. This I think is the most mental health one, pathologically high levels of authoritarianism and related personality disorders.
Okay,
right, or a less permissive sexually the guilt, the negativity about sexuality. So again, that they're closeted themselves and they can't deal with that. So they hate someone else.
Yes.
So, again, there's a lot of research on social cognition and the importance of what stereotypes hold in our brains and in our society, and what that then impacts in the world. And some people feel the need for this, kind of where do we put people, and what's the label? And homosexual persons who violate that stereotypical expectation of how a masculine gay man or feminine lesbian, they're going to get disliked, so anything that's non-conforming is going to get that stereotypical label, even within the gay LGBT community.
Well, that makes sense to me too, because we are now in a time and place where I think people feel more confident being openly transgender, whereas trans has always existed.
Yes.
But because of societal constraints and repercussions, those repercussions being death until just recently, you could not express yourself. Obviously, that's still under scrutiny. There's all this legislation, but it's almost like we got to a point in this country where most folks are accepting of gays and lesbians. Yeah. But then comes along this other category and they're like, wait, I can't wrap my head around this.
To get with Ellen DeGeneres being gay.
Right. It's like, oh man, you're throwing more at us. That really is confusing, because the mindset that one has to undertake to really understand gender fluidity. And first of all, you just have to not give a fuck, because it has no impact on you. No impact whatsoever.
No.
As long as somebody is happy, healthy, being their true, authentic self,
and
that is all that should matter.
Way to society,
not hurting themselves, not hurting anybody else. But I think that a lot of folks have not made that jump yet, and will never necessarily be capable of making that jump. And they're so confused and so unwilling to learn.
Well, again, I believe that that's a stigma and a shame in society, that you're talking about that mental struggle.
Yeah.
And, our medical model hasn't helped the average Joe and Jane in that confusion. And, again, when you're saying you're confused in this day and age with Google, like, you're just being ignorant in my mind. There's no cause and effect in anything psychology has taught me, especially about sexuality, especially about sexual desires. It's all fair game.
Yeah.
As long as it's legal, and as long as it's not legal, as long as it's consensual.
Yeah.
And it's, you do whatever you want, do whatever you feel.
Yeah.
And, but when it's about sex, it gets really murky. And I think that people holding political, religious, and medical power, drag, in my mind, holds this power to push those boundaries and provides healing and support for a community.
Right.
Drag queens are the MCs of a lot of pride events.
Yeah.
Their very presence is like that maternal love that I think I'm getting chills right now.
Yeah.
Gay men and lesbian women need it because they didn't have family.
That's right.
And were rejected.
My mom was kicked out of the house at 15.
And it's fun. It's fun for the sake of fun.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And the public's inaccurate assumptions and perceptions, we're still living in a time where LGBT people are 4 times more likely to be victims of violent crimes than non-LGBT. And that's from a 2022 study in UCLA. And I bet that's even higher.
And don't even get me started on Black trans women and their mortality rate.
Well, and if you're an addict, and if you're homeless.
And that is the fate for so many LGBTQ plus and especially trans folks who don't have family and friends that they can rely on.
Yeah. And if you are a good drag performer, there's good money in it.
It
costs a lot of
money,
money.
It's expensive.
It's expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, if you are a beautiful human, you're going to make good money being a performer no matter what your gender or sex is.
Right.
If you're good at your craft.
Right.
And that's really what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What you and I are talking about. But there are still people in positions of privilege and power that are phobic and ignorant. The research is still lacking, even in the academic community. The impact and the hatred of others is what causes the mental health risk.
Yeah.
That quote lifestyle does not cause a mental health.
Right.
You are not mentally ill because you're a drag queen.
Right.
You might have mental illness because of the impact of not having a family, not having support, not being able to make a living.
Right.
That's what causes
or just straight up trauma.
Yes.
You know, which anybody, regardless of how they identify and what they do, can fall victim to.
Yeah. And, you know, so again, if there's one thing that I can kind of put a stamp here on is it's not a mental disorder.
Right.
It isn't being a drag queen, being gay, being trans,
being part of the queer community,
liking being tied up, whatever the fuck you're into.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you're sick.
That's right.
It means, I don't know what it means. You can figure that out for yourself.
Yeah.
Or make whatever that means out of it. But, you know, I like this guy wrote a Huffington Post article. He's a drama professor at Ursinus College in 2016. And his name's Dominic Skurdura. And he writes, never once have I been dragged off to a mental institution after lip syncing I Will Survive. A drag queen does not have a gender identity crisis. I'm a gay man who enjoys entertaining in drag. That is not confusing, is it? If a man wants to wear a dress, why is this fucking with your logic?
Yeah.
Let's see. And then, I love this part. I know who I am. I know what I want. I am not confused. Drag queen is not a mental disorder. There is no drag queen syndrome, queenophrenia, or dragamania.
Queenophrenia. That's awesome. Oh, and by the way, the pastor that I referred to, his name is Ted Haggard. He was an evangelical pastor. He made headlines in November 2006 when male prostitutes or sex worker and a Monsieur Mike Jones alleged that Haggard, who had advocated against the legalization of same-sex marriage, had paid him for sex for 3 years and had also purchased and used crystal meth. Yeah, he was the head of the New Life Church. So there you go. That's some hypocrisy for your ass.
Can I ask a question then?
Yeah.
Why are we not talking to that man? Like, I want to talk to him.
Yeah.
I want to understand. I think that, you know, if we're talking about cancel culture, right? And calling culture, someone like that, being able to go out and talk about what the fuck.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to shame him for shame on him, not for going to drag shows and smoking crystal or
going to male sex workers and
male sex worker in the meth, but I want to understand that level of, do you hate yourself so much? And so that's what you're willing to do. Like that's what I want the mental health community to study.
Yeah. Well, there was a documentary that came out and I remember watching it, but this was some years ago. Obviously this initially happened in 2006, but it showed Haggard with his wife and his family, still trying to live, you know, the normal, not normal, but like, you know, hetero cis life.
Yeah.
Going to like job training, because here's this guy who had been this prolific figure in the evangelical church. Now he has no job. So he's like doing re-education, like work re-education to try to learn what to do. And I don't remember if they were living out of the car or what, but instead of embracing it and being like, you know what, I'm a gay man, a bi man, whatever, I'm queer. And this is who I am. And just being happy. He's trying to force himself, this is my perception, force himself back into this box of what he thinks is an acceptable way of, an honorable way of living, you know? And so I don't imagine any happiness, you know, being a part of this man's life as long as he's denying this part of himself.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, crazy. So let's talk briefly about the importance of drag. This is from a Medium article. And the article begins with this beautiful RuPaul quote. "We're all born naked and the rest is drag." I love Ru. Drag is empowering and it serves, as we mentioned, an outlet for expression, confidence, and acceptance of one's self. Self-acceptance is incredibly important for the queer community, and people have found solace in drag culture. And, you know, drag culture develops a supportive and welcoming community where people feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
As many in the community say, drag is for everyone. It encompasses many expressions like drag kings and drag queens. It has space for all sexualities and all genders, including straight, cis males. Everyone has a place in drag. A sense of belonging empowers us to know we deserve better and should fight for better treatment. And the article ends with this beautiful sentiment. Drag is a testament to the human spirit's creativity that allows people to explore, express, belong, and when necessary, resist just to exist. Oh, so there are plenty of ways you can support drag. You know, we're lucky again to live in San Francisco where there's a, you know, drag brunch and a drag bar on every corner. You throw a rock, you can hit a drag queen. But we wouldn't do that to y'all.
Don't do that.
Not literally. Not
just
literally.
Just for $20s.
Just with, yes, we will make it rain in the best way possible. So here's some stuff you can do. The ACLU has a drag defense fund. We'll put the link in the notes. Support your local drag queen story hour. Go to a drag brunch or drag show, which Carolyn
I just did that
today. Yay! Teach your children that in spite of what they may hear from others, there's absolutely nothing wrong with drag and nothing wrong with being queer. If you live in a state trying to pass or has successfully passed some backward-ass legislation against drag, write to or call your local elected officials. Show up at meetings and hearings. Make some fucking noise.
Resist.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of these laws have been overturned.
Yay!
Notice that I mentioned protest. So if you feel like, oh, protest doesn't do anything, showing up with a sign doesn't do anything, let me tell you, it does.
You were just at one.
I was just at one. Yeah, rally with other city workers. So, you know, protest is very, very important. And you show up, you make some noise. You might not get immediate results, but I guarantee, don't give up. Keep working with the community. Yeah. Keep showing up. Keep showing how much you disapprove of this backward-ass legislation.
And you'll meet community.
Yeah.
It feels good to be part of a community that's resisting.
Absolutely.
That's empowering.
Yeah. So, you know, our final thoughts on this, which is really just Jen's final thought, because I'm going to harken back to my upbringing again.
I agree with you.
Good. I'm glad. You know, again, I'm saying this as a cis straight woman raised in a queer household, but, you know, when I was growing up, queer spaces were truly the only spaces where I felt safe. I didn't have to hide my mom's identity for fear of retribution from neighborhood kids or worse, their parents. And the parents are the real problem. Let me tell you a story that really embodies the sentiment. I was in 7th grade and I was walking to school with my then BFF. And another friend's dad just, you know, happened to be walking ahead of us up the hill, the long hill on the way to school. And my friend and I were laughing like Mozart and Amadeus. Let me demonstrate. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
That's exactly how he laughed in the movie. And, you know, this insecure, immature mess of a man thought that we, children, were mocking him. So this motherfucker turns around and yells, "At least my mama ain't no dyke." And I got to tell you, that was like a gut punch because I thought I was pulling off the secret pretty well. I don't think I was, but, you know, it was really embarrassing. It was awful. But fortunately I had good friends who didn't give a fuck. And I remember it clear as day. The daughter of this man came up to me at school. She was like one of the only people who had a cell phone. So I guess he had called her and she was like, "I heard what he did to you." I think it was her stepdad. And she was like, "I am so sorry." Wow. And you know, I was being embraced by people that for some reason I was convinced would turn their back on me if they knew my mom was gay. You know, my point is this: feeling a sense of belonging and inclusion and safety is important for adults and children alike. And drag and other queer inclusive spaces provide that for folks.
Always.
Assholes on the right have absolutely no business trying to rip these spaces from people. No business denigrating and shitting on what they do not understand. Mm-hmm. So please support your local queer artists, drag artists, whatever, in an effort to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to feel safe, included, and loved.
Well said.
Thank you. We're all human. And most of us want the same thing.
Yeah.
And we have more in common with one another than we don't.
Yeah.
And I think that knowing, go out there and get yourself a drag queen friend. Go out there and get yourself a queer friend.
Yeah.
Because so often that's the turning point for people.
Yeah.
Once they meet somebody from this community and they have a positive experience, then it's strange, but it's human nature.
Yeah.
Then they can start viewing others in that community as being positive. Hey, maybe they're not so bad.
Yes.
You know? and it sounds simplistic,
yeah.
But again, we have the good fortune of living in and being raised in a place where this was never strange.
No.
This was never abnormal. This was every day.
So this is kind of a call to action, I think, too, for someone like me who has lived in this community and benefited so much from that gift, mm-hmm. to make sure that that is a safe space other places, because it's not for I think, the majority of people.
I agree.
So
yeah. So that's that. Hopefully you did okay with that. We're always, because this is a call to action and because we see that our drag brothers and sisters are under attack, we felt like it was really important to do this episode. Again, this isn't our community, but we strongly support this community. And as at least an adjacent member of the queer community, this is really important to me and Carolyn as well. So yay! Go out there and yell at some haters. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.